steps in the accommodation process are multi-tiered. The first step is getting to the office of accessibility, and the second is meeting the eligibility requirements. Third is developing an accommodation plan. 4 is implementing the accommodation plan. And 5 might be revising the accommodation plan. I'm going to go through each of these so that you will know what will happen at each. And also, if you have any questions, you can always talk to the coordinator of the Office of Accessibility for more information. Step 1, getting to the Office of Accessibility. There might be many ways that a student gets to the Office of Accessibility. One might be outreach by the coordinator of accessibility services. Another might be referrals from staff and faculty. For example, if you express to a teacher that you may have had accommodations undergrad, but you don't think that you need them now, your teacher may encourage you to seek some assistance or at least get some information from the Office of Accessibility. It's common for a lot of students to come into graduate school thinking that they won't need accommodations or wanting to try to not use them. But if you've received accommodations in the past, then it's probably a good idea to look into them now while you're in graduate school. Also, if you ask for an accommodation, the teacher will most likely ask you for a letter of accommodation. So they will probably refer you to the Office of Accessibility in those cases. Also, most teachers put a statement on their syllabus about accommodating students. So hopefully you have found your way to the Office of Accessibility and now looking for some accommodations. Step 2 is meeting the eligibility requirements. What this means is that once a student has filled out all of the paperwork, and there is quite a few pages of paperwork that you will have to complete, and all of that can be found on the Alliant Office of Accessibility webpage. And once you have that, you will also submit documentation to the coordinator. This documentation is confidential and will be retained by the coordinator in a file that is separate from the rest of your academic records. The information about disability is based on a need-to-know basis. So what that means is that when you ask for an accommodation from a faculty member, there is no need to say, and it's because I have ADHD, or it's because I have a psychiatric disability. All they need to know is that you have a disability that is part of that you receive an accommodation for. Documentation for disability services needs to meet Alliance standards. And what this means is that there is a formal diagnostic assessment to verify the student's disability and to identify limitations. This is done by a professional with credentials for those diagnoses. And what that means is that if you have a psychiatric disability, then a chiropractor probably isn't the person who's going to be the qualified professional that you receive a letter from, so that there should be a good match between who is giving you that documentation and what your disability is. And this documentation should meet the standards and guidelines of Alliant. That can be dependent on what the disability is, because there is a different level of documentation based on the disability. In general, documentation that is accepted includes a diagnosis, how the diagnosis impairs the individual in terms of major life activities and what accommodations are needed to help remediate those limitations. Student and disability coordinators, or the Office of Accessibility, discuss accommodations in an interactive process. As part of that, you will consider what the essential skills of the program are and how these accommodations work into that. At the end, an accommodation plan is written and approved. And the Office of Accessibility writes an agreement plan with the student that outlines the accommodations that they receive, as well as a letter to the faculty. And as a student, you will be getting both of these to confirm the accommodations that you receive. An accommodation is defined as adaptations aimed at lessening the impact of a disability. Accommodations are designed to focus on mitigating the limitations caused by a disability and are individualized for each person and each course. So it really is dependent on the disability and the functions that the person has to perform. Accommodations for students with disabilities that have been upheld under the Americans with Disabilities Act in Section 504 include time and a half to double time on exams. Please note that unlimited time has not been upheld. Quiet rooms for exams. Readers. Limited leaves of absence for medical reasons. Assistance in registering and applying for financial aid, classroom modifications, equipment modifications, note-taking assistance, and priority in housing and or parking. Some of these don't apply to all campuses, but because this training is for all campuses, it's important to include some of these, such as housing. Step 4 is implementing the accommodation plan. Once you have the accommodation letter for the faculty, you should present that to them, keeping in mind that you should request an accommodation at least 2 weeks ahead of time. So if you have a test that is a midterm, you should be requesting that at least 2 weeks before that test. Now, what may be a good practice for you is to disclose to the faculty the first week or two and let them know that you need an accommodation, and then revisit them later on in the term. So this is especially important because faculty have so many things going on, and it's great that you ask for an accommodation ahead of time, but it's also important that you remind them that that is an accommodation need, and as soon as the test comes closer, to discuss where the test should be taken, if there's going to be a proctor, and all of those kind of logistical things that the two of you will need to work out. When you talk to faculty, if you encounter any problems whatsoever, contact the Office of Accessibility Coordinator immediately. This is important because they can address some of the issues that you encountered and can mediate in any issues that can come up. Step 5, revising the accommodation plan. There is no need to consistently revise the accommodation plan. The accommodations that you receive in first year are likely going to continue with you throughout your time at Alliant. But there may be changes that need to be made based on your disability. So if your disability changes whatsoever, then you may need to adjust your accommodations, or an adjustment may be needed based on the functions that you're doing in school. For example, if you're in the clinical psych track and you're doing assessments, there may be some things that were unexpected in the assessment process that you didn't know you would have issues with because of your sight or because of a physical disability. So it's completely appropriate to make some changes to the accommodation plan. Communication about these changes will also occur between you and the Office of Accessibility coordinator. So a new accommodations agreement will be written up, as well as a letter to the faculty that you'll then use to ask for accommodations. A student may wish to appeal an accommodation at any time. For more information on this process, you can go to the link listed here. Also, this information can be accessed from the Office of Accessibility page, where also all of the forms are for your intake. As the director of the Office of Accessibility, I personally hope that your education here at Alliant is enjoyable, educational, and accessible. I encourage you to use the coordinators on your campus to access the classroom and your internships. If you have any questions, please address them there, as well as presenting your documentation and any other forms that you might have. Thank you for your time, and I hope this training has been beneficial. Thank you.